So now we've finished the entrance rites, the penitential rite, and the opening prayer, and now we begin the Liturgy of the Word.
The Liturgy of the Word has its origin 2,500 years ago. At the time the temple was destroyed and the people were carried off to Babylon, the priests suddenly had no function. There was no way for the people to gather to speak to God. What were they going to do? Judaism was going to die. A lay movement called the Pharisaic movement, which is where we get the name Pharisee today, the Pharisaic movement, which was a lay movement, got together and said, we are people of the book. We've got to get together on a regular basis, daily if we can, to read the scriptures and reflect on what they mean to us. And so that's where the synagogues began. They were a gathering place in every small community where people gathered to hear 5 readings, and after the 5th reading, there was always a commentary and often a discussion about how do we apply these readings in our life circumstances now. When the Christians were driven out of the synagogues following the destruction of Rome, they felt that that practice of having 5 readings plus a commentary was so important that they continued it in the Christian liturgy. Now, there are 5 readings. Most people don't realize there's 5 readings. The first reading is what we customarily call first reading, usually from the Old Testament, except in the season of Easter where it comes from the book of Acts. The second reading is the psalm. The purpose of the psalm is to respond to the first reading. So there's a thematic connection between the psalm and the first reading. The next reading is always from the New Testament. The books, English translations, call it the second reading. It's really the third. The fourth reading is the gospel acclamation. It's always a verse or 2 from Scripture that foreshadows what you're going to hear in the gospel. So the fourth reading and the gospel are thematically connected. So that's where we get the 5 readings. During daily Mass, because that middle reading doesn't have a thematic connection to either the first or the gospel, it is generally dropped. So during daily Mass, you don't have that middle reading. But during Sunday and Holy Days, you have the full 5 readings. And it has its origin back in the synagogue movement 2,500 years ago. In modern times, this discussion that followed the presentation got to be impractical. The church is far too large. And so the discussion, the people literally speaking about the reading has fallen by the wayside. It doesn't exist anymore. But the homily was initially the rabbi, or the presbyter, as the Christians called him, would sit in a chair, would comment on the reading, and then people would talk about, well, I don't understand what that means. And that's literally what the synagogue experience was about, which Christianity has continued through what is known as the Liturgy of the Word.